is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Haunting of Bly Manor. Season 1, Episode 7, The Two Faces, Part 2. In this episode, we finally find out what happened to Miss Jessel. And it's horrifying. It's so awful. I really wasn't ready. I should have known, and I think I did a little, but still. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. I am really, really sad that there's only 2 episodes left to this show. I am super into it. Rashawn and I talked about it because she watched it while she was on her birthday break. And she just had a lot more time to binge TV. So she decided she was going to try and catch up on some series that had been recommended to her. And she wasn't super into this show. I think she said she got to episode 3 or 4 and she sort of fizzled out. And I was just so surprised by that. But also, she really did not connect with the kids at all. She didn't like them. So I think that might be part of it for me. As much as I find Miles upsetting so much at the time, I knew fairly certainly that wasn't him. And like I said, they really managed to cast these kids well, where they can do both endearing and creepy. And that's not easy, you know? So this episode is just so full of revelations. Look, I'm gonna comment on something out of the gate here because it needs to be addressed. And I don't want it to flavor my whole episode. So there's a scene in this episode where Peter has a conversation with his mother, and that winds up being sort of the memory that he's stuck in over and over again. And the implication is that he was either raped or at the minimum molested by his father, and that his father also did this to maybe friends of his that came over for sleepovers, because he mentions that. And that his mother knew and didn't do anything. And my issue is that it's really become this trope that people who suffer sexual violence become the villain. And I don't want to focus on it too much because the story has a lot more going on than just what's happening with Peter Quint. But I really was bummed at the fact that they felt the need to make that a backstory for him, because it's so frequently a thing. And making victims into villains is just kind of a gross message that, you know, we just, for some reason, especially in the last 15, 20 years, we've just wanted to humanize villains and make them have these really dark sort of secrets that motivated them to turn into whatever they are today. And while I understand that in an abstract sense, sometimes people are just bad people. And sometimes people had a ton of privilege and really managed to luck out in every sense, and they are still terrible, or that's what made them terrible. And I wish that we could be okay with that as human beings and let that be its own, not everything needs a dark backstory. But, you know, it doesn't. It's not necessarily helpful, and it's certainly not necessary. And I just wish that they hadn't done that here. Now, I'm not sure if that's even going to matter later on. So this is the kind of thing that, I like I said, don't want to dwell on too much because I don't feel that this backstory of his is going to come up again, that we even need to know it. But that is also part of why I wish it wasn't here. Like, the point of it, of us learning this, is that we see the memory that he keeps being tucked away into. And that it's a terrible memory with somebody who was, like, simultaneously enabling an abuser, being an abuser, and continuing to, like, haunt him well into adulthood, past the point, like, there's, you know, this idea that we can grow up and escape the home life that was no good, but oftentimes that's not how that works. It follows you into adulthood, and that's what's happening here. His mother is in that scene shaking him down, and we find out that she's the motivation for him embezzling, or at least that's supposed to be the takeaway. And I can't, like, I really, again, we have to humanize people. Can't he just be an embezzler? Can't he just be, like, kind of a shitty person with, like, some indignation over the fact that he is in a less privileged position and wanting to, like, exact some revenge? It's fine. I don't need him to be a victim also. It's just not really necessary. It's not interesting. And I just don't get the point, you know? Just let him be the bad guy. I don't need layers to everything. It's okay, you know? So anyway, the point is that he's stuck in this memory that's, like, it's much less pleasant than the memories that everybody else winds up getting put away in when they are sort of tucked off. And so this is, I think, meant to sort of underline his desperation to get out of the situation that he's in. It's not something that it's easy for him to accept because it's a painful, terrible memory instead of one of the, like, better memories in his life. Now, that said, we also find out that Miss Jessel is stuck in a terrible memory. It's like a good memory before he does what he does to her. And that taints it and makes it so much worse. But anyway, like I said, I just wanted to talk about that out of the gate because in the moment when he's in that scene and he's performing, I was just blown away by what a great actor he was. And when he's talking to his mother, first of all, the woman who plays his mom is really good at feeling like the kind of person who would pretend to be passive in a situation where she wasn't, where she had, like, a choice where she could have stepped in, and also being really manipulative. She's very good. I can't tell, but I think this might be the same actress from an episode of Poirot that I really enjoyed also. She looks vaguely familiar, and I kept trying to place her. And especially the moment where he's talking to her and says something about how, I hope that you found out, like, that this is how I died. And that you feel like shit. And she says, sweetheart, I don't even know that you're dead. And that was particularly devastating. Is like, there's no closure for him. He was still being manipulated by her as a full-grown adult. And even when he winds up suffering this horrible fate, he doesn't get the satisfaction of her guilt over it because she doesn't even know. And just, yeah, that's the worst. I hope you know that you killed your own son. Honey, I don't even know that you're dead. Yeah, this moment, I, like I said, really loved the acting. And she's amazing. Like, she's really sinister. I hate her. I really hate her. But it's just, it felt like the actual subject matter of the scene didn't need to be what it was. So anyway, backing up from there, the end of the last episode ended with Danny getting smashed on the back of the head by Miles. And when we start this one, she wakes up and she's tied up and she's gagged and she's absolutely freaking out. And she finally gets a look at the ghosts of Miss Jessel and of Peter Quint. And she has to do so much scared acting in this scene. And it must be really exhausting to just be at this like kind of level 11 panic take after take. And she's really very convincing. And throughout this scene, I just was like, I had said to you guys, we have the moment of Miss Jessel talking to Flora and saying what's wrong with Miles. Like, she isn't aware of what's going on. And I was confused by that because I had felt like there was an implication that she and Peter Quint were working together. And then when she said that, I was like, oh, maybe she doesn't know exactly what's going on. Oh my God. Did you guys hear that? My cats are fighting. I don't know what just happened. But anyway, I continued to just be not certain of her allegiance. And I was really, yes. Ariel has commented, she was in one episode of Poirot in season 3. Episode 3 is Nurse Long and Miranda Brooks. Spoiler a little bit because she's in disguise, as is so often the case in Agatha Christie novels. But yes, that's the exact one that I was thinking of. Cool. Thank you, Ariel. So this whole thing is, it was the kind of thing where I should have seen, because I already sort of had suspicions that Miss Jessel wasn't actually on Peter Quint's side. But I still, because I just didn't have a full picture of the two of their plan together, I was still falling for the fact that she was on his side right up until the end. And so even though the twist isn't that surprising, really, I still wasn't prepared for it. And I always find it so interesting when that happens, where it's like, you know, usually I can really piece together things coming. And sometimes if I don't, it's because the pieces weren't there for me to see. But sometimes they were, and I still missed it. And I'm always like, how did that happen? But I like it when it happens, because it's always more interesting to be surprised. So the whole thing with this episode is that Peter Quint is wanting to get out of like the grounds of Bly Manor, because what happens to all of the ghosts of people who died here is that they lose their eyes and basically their face melts away. We don't know why this happens. And we only have his word for it that it always happens, but it seems, based on what we have seen of the ghosts around here, to be correct. So he is desperate to get off the grounds. And this leads to the flashback, what happened between him and Miss Jessel. So first we see a scene of her being interviewed by maybe like the lawyer for the estate, who is questioning both her and Hannah about what happened with Peter Quint. And he announces that he's been embezzling, and wants to know, oh no, this isn't a lawyer, my bad, this is a cop. This is just a straight up cop. I don't know why I thought it was a lawyer. But yeah, he is questioning her because she was the closest of everyone to Peter, and wants to know if he gave any indications of where he could have gone, because of course they're operating under this assumption that he just like fled the country, not that he's dead and in the fucking pond outside. So he's asking her and figures out that was sleeping with him, and wants to know if Peter told her where they were going to go, what was going to, because she tells him about how Peter said to pack a bag. And he gets pretty aggressive about being like, well, I would have thought if he gave a shit about you at all, he would have told you what was going on. But then I guess he did just leave you here. And this provokes a pretty strong reaction in her where she's like, no, he didn't. And then we cut to her upstairs, going back to her bedroom. And she runs into... Or no, sorry, it's not in her bedroom. She is out in the garden in this sort of like weird... It almost looks like a... what's the word? Not a pergola, but like a pavilion. But it's like cement or stone. It's weird looking. And it's right by the lake. And she's looking out into the lake, unaware that that's right where he is. And Jamie comes up. And she gets kind of like combative right out of the gate, thinking that Jamie's here to gloat over how right she was that Peter was garbage. But instead, Jamie is reminding her basically, hey, remember how like your career was super important to you? Well, this is the perfect time for you to capitalize on what's been going on and use this as leverage. And you're not even aware of it because you're so caught up in this fucking dude that apparently your personal goals have completely fallen by the wayside. And this is one of those things that really does happen in abusive relationships. I'm really lucky that I never have been in one. Not like this, you know. I've been in ones that were toxic, but that's different. But abusers really can get people to forget what it is they want and make it so that all it is that person wants is to please the abuser. And that becomes their goal over all else. And it's just devastating to watch it happen, especially when it's somebody who was formerly very focused and dedicated, driven, determined. And then you see that just sort of become tamped down over time until it's practically gone. And this whole thing with Miss Jessel and what he does to her is such a great analogy for an abusive relationship. It really just, it is. So Jamie reminds her of this and it's like, you need to go and talk to him in person and present your case. And I kind of liked this moment because, you know, she expected Jamie to be really judgmental, but instead, Jamie says to her, I'm really sorry this happened to you. You don't deserve it. And if there's anything I can do to help, please tell me. I'd be happy to do so. And it's just awful because Becca is clearly really touched by this. And we know that she's doomed. But it does feel in that moment like something happened. Like that reminder from Jamie, it feels like it did sink in. And then she goes to her room and she sees Peter in the corner. And of course, her initial reaction is, what the fuck? Where have you been? And she starts shouting at him. And he finally manages to calm her down and shows her that he's a ghost. In a very well done scene, I thought. And this just is, she was so close to being free of him. You know, this is really the tragedy for me, is if she had listened to Jamie and driven down and talked to Henry that day, things might have gone totally differently. I don't know that they would have, because I don't doubt, you know, when she comes back, then I am assuming Peter would still have reached out to her. But maybe if she had a plan and had moved on mentally onto the next step of things already, it wouldn't have been as easy to convince her. But instead, she hasn't actually taken that step yet. And finding out that he didn't abandon her, but that he died, it just sort of confirms everything that she wanted to believe, which is that he did genuinely care about her, and that he didn't abandon her the way that everybody thinks he did and the way that she thought. Now, what's so it's just so sad is that we do know that in his way he does care about her, but it's simply not, it's not pure. He doesn't love her. He's got way too much self-interest for that. And he is kind of stunted. And so he doesn't know, he just doesn't know how to express this without it being self-centered. And there are people out there like that, man. So he explains this to her, and we see how preoccupied she is with seeing him all day. And eventually she goes back up to the wing of the house that he's sort of hiding out in, and presents her idea that maybe they go to America and just live together as a live woman and a ghost man. Which, there's a lot of stories out there like that, but, girl, you're going to want to get laid eventually, I would think. How are you going to... It's just not a good idea. It's just not. But it's a moot point because he can't leave Bly. And she starts to really freak out and just be like, it is not fair. I can't even touch you. You don't even remember what happened. And he tries to shush her and then grabs her and winds up possessing her. And it's the second time that he's done that, because we know that he possessed Miles for a moment. But he seems very surprised that he was able to do it again. I'm not entirely sure if he just thought that the thing that happened with Miles was simply because maybe Miles is a child and it's easier, or it was because of him having just died and maybe it's easier when you were your body is still there. But he is really still shocked by it. And I'm like, you can do this. Why are you, So this winds up leading to an agreement between the two of them. First, they are going to try for her getting his spirit off the grounds. And she walks past Jamie on the way out, possessed by Peter, to do this experiment and gets stopped by Jamie. And clearly doesn't, this is Peter talking to Jamie. And Peter doesn't know about this conversation. He doesn't remember any of this. So the conversation is weirdly stilted and her whole posture is off, and Jamie can sort of tell. But what are you thinking? She's possessed? No, you just figure, oh, okay, she's acting weird, but she's had a lot going on, I guess. And she runs to the division of the property, but he gets thrown out of her body. And so she is able to cross, but his spirit is still on the other side. And it's, just a bummer. They thought that they could make this work, and it just didn't. And eventually, they have this, moment where he is telling her that he's found out more about what's going on the grounds. I've been exploring things here at Bly, and I've seen things. And he says, do you trust me? I need you to trust me because I have a plan that'll let us be together again and touch each other and taste each other. And he doesn't tell her what the plan is. He doesn't actually explain it. And she doesn't ask. This is what kills me. He's trying to explain to her, when I'm inside you, it's temporary because you always manage to push me out. But what if there was a way for us to be truly, fully together? We would be equals. So, just a suggestion here, and like I said, he's explaining some, but he's not, not really. what it is that he is like, I'll ride around in your head for the rest of your life. And you'll feel me there, I guess, and see me, or like sort of. But I can't think of anything worse than that. Are you kidding? Somebody who's like in my head all the time? Oh my God, no. Holy shit. And like I said, this is a pretty good analogy in some ways, or metaphor, for an abusive relationship where this person convinces you to like give things up. They certainly take things away from you, but an abuser who's really like subtle gets you to think that giving things up was your own idea. And thus, when you try and like break free from things, they'll sort of be like, I can't believe you're blaming me for that. You were the one who decided to do that. And make you feel like they gaslight you, right? So he tells her, it would be us together, and you would have to agree and let me in. I think it's a lot simpler than you think, but it just boils down to you. It's up to you. Now, that's what the implication is, like I said, that he is going to be in her head for her. That's the implication on her end, that she's interpreting it as, because she's not asking questions. As soon as he started to say, for us to be together, I was like, oh my God, he means dead. I had sort of thought she killed herself, or was like trapped somehow, maybe dragged in there. I don't know, similar thing that happened to him. But he kills her. He tricks her into letting him take over her body entirely, pretty much. He acts like they'll be equals, but then he shoves her out of the way and walks her right into the lake. And in her tucked away area, she finally starts to sense that something's wrong. And in the memory that she's in with him, he suddenly disappears, and she sees the water, and she comes back into herself, but it's too late. And I just, this whole scene with him like dead at the bottom, and her looking down at his body and realizing that she's been under too long and that he left her. And that was the part that later on, when she repeats that was like just heartbreaking. Her saying, you left me as the water started to come into my lungs. You left. And it's just the most selfish thing. He is in a situation that he wants to get out of, and he has decided to sacrifice her in order to achieve it, and not be honest with her at any step regarding what it actually requires. It's so gross. And I just, the whole metaphor for an abusive relationship, that person does feel like they are in control of you. And then you suddenly realize and look around, and sometimes you're too deep in to get out of it. That happens. And that's when people either wind up staying forever and that's their life, or they'll wind up dead, like this. And you just want people to be able to see sooner what the reality of their situation is, but you can't force somebody to see that stuff. It's awful to watch from the outside, you guys. It's awful, especially when it's somebody that you like really love and you watch them transform as a person as well. You see the warning signs to begin with, and you're like, oh, this isn't good. But when you watch them change, that's the worst part, I think. It's a loss of self. And that's such a violation. And then we cut to her outside the pond, looking at her own body and crying. And her acting in that scene when she's sobbing over her own body is truly so good. I felt it in my gut, you know, that whole like, that incredible grief. And it's both due to the loss of her life and the betrayal. She trusted him and let him in, and he did this. It's really just such a layered horror. And Flora, across the lake, it seems like Flora can see her, but I'm not sure if she can at that moment or not. I think she can. But she's looking at the body, and you see Jamie come upon her and wondering what the hell Flora's doing, because it's like pouring rain outside and she's just standing there. And Jamie spots the body and realizes what's going on, and is just like, it's a horrible situation for this little girl who's lost her parents already. And then for this apparent suicide, and this little girl to be the one that found the body, like, oh, so awful. So that's what's going on with Miss Jessel. That's how she died. And I was really frustrated when we go back to some other scenes with her and Peter, where I was just like, he just completely betrayed you, and you're acting like you're going to go along with this scheme. I don't understand. I was like, did she just get that thoroughly brainwashed, or did his like betrayal basically crack her and make it so that she was like, you know what? I'm dead already. Fine. We'll do whatever you want. Who fucking cares at this point, you know? But either way, I was sort of like, I don't like that. But then it turns out, no, she's just pretending to go along with it. And she warned Flora and got Flora on the same page. So what it is that Peter Quint is apparently going to do, he wants her to take over Flora completely, and he wants to take over Miles completely. I don't really understand what he intended to do beyond that, because we know they can't leave Bly, right? So short term, you have a body to live in, which is certainly better than nothing, I guess. But you're going to need to like let him go to school. There's, you know, it's not even just like the kind of thing that you can just be an eccentric. Oh, he hasn't left Bly Manor for... This is a child, and he has adults in charge who will put him in vehicles and take him off the premises when necessary and make him do things. I don't really understand how he planned to get around things like that, because then he'd exit Miles's body when Miles leaves the premises. And or maybe it's supposed to be that if Miles completely consented, then he would be able to cross the boundary line of Bly. Is that supposed to be what makes the difference? Because it doesn't work when he's in Jessel's body earlier, but she hasn't made that full consent yet. And he hasn't tested that, so he doesn't even know that that will work. And that's just, he's hinging a whole lot on something that it seems like it would be theoretical at best. And if it doesn't work, then you have completely alienated the kid that you needed for your plan to work, because they're not going to let you back in. Once they cross the boundary and you get kicked out, I'm sure that they would have a choice in letting you back in. It just feels like, ooh, it's really, really risky. I don't know. It's he's just basing a lot of his plan here on things that he doesn't know will happen. Ms. T says, remember how Miles asked if the demons needed permission to possess the pigs? That's all I could think of this episode. Yeah. And what's weird is like, they're trying to draw a delineation between a permanent possession and an at times possession. It doesn't entirely work for me, I'll be honest, for these kids to be possessed at times, but that isn't considered like completely like the same, because they can get kicked out. But then there's like this other possession where basically you've given up your whole body. I mean, I guess, but I really feel like if consent were a thing, they shouldn't be able to do it at all. Both of these kids don't really seem to like it. I don't know. But anyway, so that's, I guess his plan is to be like, yeah, I'll take over Miles's body. You take over Flora's body. We'll be able to leave Bly, and then we'll just set up as an incestuous relationship in child's bodies, which is just a pure horror show. Like, oh my God, what? I can't, oh God, makes me sick even thinking about it. And he takes over Miles's body in the full way because Miles has not been informed of the plan. This is the main thing that I'm like, could we really not have saved Miles? Was there really no way to do that? I just feel so bad for Miles. Maybe they're still saving him and Miss Jessel was wrong because like Flora says something about Miles, or maybe Danny asks, and she says it's too late. Miles is gone. And I was like, that is fucked up. Holy shit. Like, really? And I'm hoping she's wrong. But I just feel like there had to have been some way you guys could have like let him in on what the deal was here. But I guess not, because then he wouldn't have let Peter in all the way, and Peter wouldn't be so blissfully certain that his plan was working. I don't know, because I don't know what his full plan is. You know, it just feels like just get off like Bly property is it. And in Miles's body, first of all, he tells Jessel to take care of Danny. And he had just promised both Flora and Miles that he wouldn't do anything to hurt Danny. So he's just like, he's not even doing the like, I didn't say that we wouldn't do such. He's not even doing the sort of letter of the law thing. He's straight up lying like left and right. Ariel says, and he probably thought that Rebecca might back down if he didn't act fast with all of it, so he just had to hope it would work all together, and then maybe escape to America with his money he stole with a new life and identities. Yeah, I guess. It's just, again, it just feels like there are way too many unknown factors, sir. And when he says, I've been learning some things, and I've been around, like, it feels like he is addressing something, some other kind of like possession that he has been witnessing, or heard about. And I really want to know what he means by that when he's like, yeah, I've been learning some things. How, what? Regardless. So when he takes over Miles's body, he's fully prepared to first of all murder Danny. And then he decides to take on breaking the news to Hannah about what really happened with her. In a scene that is so upsetting because it's a white man telling a black woman that she needs to be put in her place, which really feels on point. And he's leading her out to the well and talking about how he couldn't understand why it didn't sink in with her. Like, everybody who dies, there's this period of being disoriented and confused. But she's just straight up going on as if nothing happened. And he says something about how she's like creating whole outfits, even right down to the earrings. And how almost impressed he is by it. But there's also this sense of like resentment because he wasn't able to carry on like this. I mean, Hannah, everyone can see her. You know, she is like such a part of things that nobody even is aware that she's dead. And he, for his part, had to like actively work to figure out how he could manifest so that Becca could even see him, because that wasn't possible for a while. So I think that's a lot of it as well, is that somehow, I don't know if it's due to the fact that she like belongs to Bly so much that she was like so, her whole heart was dedicated to the place and the people to such a degree, or if it was simply her love for Owen and this like attachment that she had that kept her. But, you know, he has a love for Miss Jessel, but it's also not like pure, real love. It's tainted. So whatever it is, it's clear that he really resents the fact that despite her death, she is still able to like go on living in a way. And I think he would argue all the ways that really matter. Although we know like she can't leave Bly and she'll never actually get to be with the person that she loves. So he like makes her come over to the well and look down inside and see her own body. And he compares this to like Wile E. Coyote and the fact that like as long as he doesn't look down, he's able to keep running even when there's no road under his feet anymore and he's gone right off the edge of the cliff. And so he's trying to get her to similarly have her wake up call. I'm really curious if this is going to work. Because we have seen her remember her own death in the past. And it didn't shake her out of this. She still went right back into her pattern of appearing and disappearing and being stuck in memories and everything. I don't really know if this is going to have the effect he seems to think it will. Like, I hope it doesn't. Because she's not like able to live really, but she seems to have somehow more of a life than any of the other ghosts do. And I'd like it if she could keep that. He's trying to steal it from her just because he resents her having it when he doesn't. There's no real reason behind it other than spite. And I'm just hopeful that he thinks this is going to snap her out of it and it doesn't really work. We'll see. But because it pretty much cuts from there to what happens with Flora. Flora and Danny and Miss Jessel. So, like I said, there's the whole scene with Flora and she apparently lets Miss Jessel completely take her over. And Miles and Flora are talking back and forth and he asks, "Can you feel her?" And Flora says, "A little." And he's just straight up excited about this, you know, like the ghoulishness of taking away a child's body and their life. It's really amazing in a way. And I don't know if this is intentional or not, but he has this whole confrontation with his mother about what his father did to him and that she knew. And she didn't do anything. And this is like a similar violation. He's perpetuating the kinds of like breach of trust, invasion, violation, and innocence and ignorance that his father exploited. It's a really similar thing. And in some ways, that is interesting because it's like showing us the cycle of abuse in a way that one wouldn't expect to see it, you know? But it is sort of... I just have very mixed feelings on that, as you all know. So, Flora, as it turns out, was faking. And Miss Jessel has not completely taken her over. Because Miss Jessel is aware that Peter is up to no fucking good. Because she, apparently, being murdered was enough of a wake-up call. Thank God. So they help Danny get, like, all of her ropes off of her and her gag off of her. But we have this thing that I don't really understand. And I'm wondering if any of you can, like, explain to me. Flora is talking to Miss Jessel, saying, like, did I do it right? And, you know, just basically sort of having this moment of commiseration over the plan. And when I think Flora says something about, like, well, I thought that that Peter just needed some help. And Miss Jessel says nobody should need that much help, not from anybody, which was an interesting sort of line. It really felt to me like Flora understood what was happening. Miss Jessel says it's too late for Miles, but not for her. Get her as far away from this house as you possibly can. And I thought that she was like, I mean, Flora is right there. And she looks over at her and says, go on, quickly. So it felt like we were all on the same page here. Danny gets up and she's rushing Flora out of the house. And I really thought Flora felt the urgency, that she understood what was going on and that they needed to get the hell out of here. And instead, when we get outside, Flora says, what about Miles? And Danny is like, we can't get Miles. And then says, where are we going? And Danny says, I don't know, anywhere. And Flora stops and says, no, I don't like this game. I'm not leaving. And you can't make me. And I really thought that she understood what was going on. But as soon as we get to this, I'm like, oh, so she doesn't know. Like, did Miss Jessel just not inform her that Miles was beyond saving? Because that is fucking grim news to have to give a kid, that they're about to also lose their brother when they lost their other two family members. Is it, like, wouldn't she want to get off the property with everything that is going on? Like, I just think of myself as a kid, and I would have been fucking fleeing. Like, just flat out sprint. Danny would have a hard time keeping up with me. But instead, she's like, turning around and yelling for Miles. And I'm like, but you saw Miles, like, you saw what happened. I don't know if she just doesn't understand the extent of it, maybe. But yeah, it was very frustrating because up until this point, I was like, oh, Flora, you are good. Look at you, like, using your head. And then all of a sudden, she just reverted back to being a kid. And it's just, me being frustrated, but it's very understandable. Ariel says, I think it's just because it's all confusing and rushed and terrifying, and she's so young, it's hard for her to grasp all this so quick. I don't know that Flora knows about the property line thing either. Yeah, I mean, even if she didn't, like, I would want to just get out of the house. I don't know. I just really, I wanted her to get it a little bit more. If it had just been that she didn't know Miles was too far gone, that would be okay, but I would need them to change the way the scene went down between Miss Jessel and Danny, because Miss Jessel says it's too late for Miles right in front of Flora. Flora's literally like a foot away. And so if that were the thing, I would want it to be like, she explains this while Flora's like goes and grabs slippers or something to put on, like you could write it so that there's a moment where Danny's alone with Miss Jessel. And then Flora has completely not heard any of this and genuinely thinks, no, but we can save Miles. What are you talking about? So it's just like a small couple of like little rewrites here and there, I feel like could have made this moment make a little bit more sense to me and feel less like it was completely out of nowhere. It's not a huge deal, but it's just like, because this is like the main moment that leads to Danny getting got, it is somewhat important. And also, like, apparently Flora and Miss Jessel have talked some about this plan, but yeah, like Ariel says, I don't know that Flora knows about the property line thing either. I really wish that was something that we knew for sure. I would like to have seen some of the conversation if we did a flashback to like what it was that she was informed about. Just, because I just don't know what she knows and what she doesn't know. Also, I would have loved to see exactly, because I guess they were just going to sprint down to the property line. Because they don't have a car. There's no car parked out in front. And so, how long would it take? Would they have actually been able to get away before Miles noticed they were gone? I would assume so. But I really wonder what Miles can do. If he's possessed by Peter Quint now, and Peter Quint wants to take his revenge out on Miss Jessel, who has remained behind, but she's still a ghost, and now he's in a body, would he be able to do that? I wonder if there's anything that he could do, because he is like... I am assuming that he can't freely leave Miles's body now and get back in. That's like, once he leaves, that sort of breaks... He got permission the one time. I might be wrong about that, though. It might be that when you give permission, you've given permission, period, and you can't retract it. But I don't like that idea. I don't think that's how that should work. But yeah, I just really like, Danny and Flora might get away, but Miss Jessel is still there. And what could he do to her, and what could she do to him is the other question. Because we have a ghost that can grip people up who are alive and kill them, as we see a second later. Guys, this moment made me almost pee myself. I was so scared. So Flora's yelling, I don't like this game. I'm not leaving. And you can't make me. And Danny turns around to run, and the ghost is right there and grabs her by the throat and begins dragging her away. The way that they do this ghost and her ponderous slow walk is so spooky. Her face is so creepy. The eyeless thing is incredibly unnerving anyway, but combined with her the ring style hair and everything being damp, it just makes it so much more fucking, I hate it so much. So if there is a ghost that can kill people who are alive, maybe Miss Jessel, can she kill Miles? Because even if she did, Peter won't go anywhere. He'll just return to the property. And then what? He'll try and do this again on somebody else? Probably he couldn't convince anybody else, though. He managed with these two because they're children who knew him. But nevertheless, it doesn't really feel like a solution to anything, because then Miles is dead. And that's not good. That's not a better outcome, is it? I don't know. There's very Get Out vibes to this whole thing, But I can't... I'm really just trying to think. Also, how does Danny get out of this fucking grip that this thing has on her? Because it killed Peter Quint, no problem. It was 20 seconds? And he had died. It was just strangled the life right out of him. Danny doesn't have long. And I don't know what could possibly shake this thing's grip on her. What would affect it? Because I don't know what it's after. Why is it killing people? What does it get out of it? Who is she, this original ghost? A lot of questions. I don't know. And I don't know if any of the answers to that even matter. In the end, I'm asking questions thinking that maybe this would help explain X, Y, and Z, but it might not, and it might not even come up. It may be nothing. I don't know. I feel like I really just want a happy ending where Miles is able to get out of this. And the way that Miss Jessel sort of acted like there was no way of saving him. It was a foregone conclusion. No, we just have to move on without Miles. I don't know if she knows any more about this than I do. I don't know if she has seen a person be taken over or heard about it. And if she actually knows that, or if she just felt like it will be too difficult and you'll wind up getting killed in the process. So just don't try. Because for me, I feel very protective of Flora, and I don't want her to be the sole survivor after a thing like this, you know? I can't, like, we know that Henry decided that he was going to head to Bly Manor at the end of the episode before, right? So could his, like, suddenly rolling down the drive in his car stop this ghost? I feel like there's not quite enough time for that to happen. And if he rolled down and his headlights fell on this ghost, would that actually, like, do anything? Would the ghost care? She doesn't seem to, like, really give a fuck that there are other live people around when she does this. The kids were watching the whole thing, and she was just kind of like, yeah, watch, whatever. So I don't know if that would even deter her. And I have no idea what Henry would do, because he's dealt with his own weird haunting. And so I think that he'd be likely to believe a thing like this. He wouldn't. But does he know? How much does he know about this? Has he seen this ghost before? He grew up here, right? I don't feel like this ghost would have a hard time finding people to kill. Is this ghost that old? I've been kind of assuming she is. I hope she's not, like, she wouldn't be Flora's mother or anything, because they died. I'm assuming that we were told the truth about how far away they died, because they were buried with their, and Flora says, I haven't seen my parents. I've looked, but I haven't seen them. And I believe she would know. So I would assume this ghost, it just roams the halls or the grounds, evidently, after dark. I would really think that she would have gotten a couple of other victims in the time that Henry lived here. Did they just think those people had vanished? Because as we see, Peter Quint's body is really taken straight down to the bottom of the lake. So they don't even know his body is still here. Miss Jessel's body was found, but she was killed by Peter Quint, not by this ghost. So I'm wondering if basically my question is whether Henry is familiar with this thing, or suspects, or has seen it and thinks that, like, if he did see it, I was just like a fanciful child and I imagined that, or it was a bad dream. Or is he, like, aware of it? I don't know. I just have a lot of questions about the logistics around all of this, you know? And also the story that, like, that Jessel was going to try and go for before Peter betrays her, where she's like, we'll just go to America and I'll be a batty old lady who talks to herself. Can Owen and Hannah make that work? Because that would be like heartbreaking, and it's wouldn't be enough. He would deserve more than that, of course. But that would be so adorable if, like, the cook and the housekeeper just had this cross-dimensional relationship that they just made work. It would just be so sweet, you know? I don't know. I just want things to work out for Hannah, and they won't. She's dead. Her body is moldering. It's too late. But I keep trying to find a way to, like, have a happy ending for people, and I'm just not sure that that's something the show is interested in doing at all. Ariel says, I believe they've said this is usually a summer house and not usually a permanent residence until their parents died. Oh. I mean, even so, though, this lake ghost has been up and about, like, what, 4 times? You'd really still think that there would be some encounters if people aren't being told by wide-eyed children to stay in their rooms when it's dark. I mean, adults are going to be up and about, watching television, making cups of tea. I would really think that you'd have some sort of encounter, you know, just statistically. But I don't know. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up, but I really, really enjoyed this episode. I'm super interested to see what happens next. I'm, like I said, very bummed that there's only 2 more episodes because I've really grown very, like, fond of these characters. This whole, like, household has been just sort of, it feels like a fully fleshed out group of people to me. And I'm also, like, invested in Danny. And I want everybody to be happy. I think that's what it is everybody on this show has already been put through so much that at this point, I just want things to get better for all of them, you know? Jamie as well, like, it just feels like, can't we have something good? But I don't know if we can. So, we'll have to see. Thank you again so much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for hanging out with me and listening. I hope that you have been enjoying the coverage. And let's see, when's the next one? I think it's pretty shortly. Yep, next Tuesday, March 9th, episode 8. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.